Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I am super excited and pumped to be talking to you folks today. What about you, Rashi?
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be here, especially about for talking about such an important topic for our customers.
You said it, Rashi. Again, welcome, folks. Welcome to this Learn Live session. We're here today to talk about accelerating migrations to Azure and how you can go about it. My name is Deepika, and I'm a senior product manager with the Azure Migrate team. I've been in the cloud assessment and migration space for a few years now, and I love building capabilities that can make migrations more easy and more seamless, and also enable better management for your workloads that are migrated to Azure. Well, that's about me. Rashi, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
For sure. I'm Rashi Joshi. I'm also a program manager with the Azure Migrate team. I've been doing cloud migrations for quite some time now. I started as a developer, did some consulting work, and now I work as a product manager. I'm extremely passionate about demystifying cloud and its value to businesses and customers like you. Joining us today are a couple of subject matter experts on the chat. So say hi to Bharat, Divya, Vineet, Vishal, and Chavi. They'll be moderating the chat today and will answer a lot of your questions. Moving on, we have a packed agenda planned for today. We'll be using the Learn module to follow along. We'll cover topics like benefits and drivers for migrating to Azure, how should you think through your cloud journey, and also give you a flavor of some of the most common migration projects we've seen our customers execute. We'll spend some time talking about the various tools and programs that Azure has to offer. And well, that's not it. We also have a surprise planned for you. We wanted to keep this session very real and we'll give you a detailed walkthrough of one of the migration tools that we have. So Deepika, let's give everyone a glimpse of what will they take away from this session.
Yes, absolutely, Rashi. So, to summarize, at the end of this call, you'll be able to reflect on the benefits and triggers of moving to Azure. You can understand how do I discover my IT estate at scale? How do I right size my workloads and optimize cost? How do I understand those application dependencies and build high confidence migration waves? And of course, how do I migrate at scale in compliance with my organizational requirements? For today's session, we are going to make use of two Learn Live modules and walk through them. Our moderators will put the links of these modules in the chat so you can use it as a reference as we go along the topics today. Just a quick reminder, the Learn Live modules are free to use and self-learning exercises that allow you to deep dive on a topic and with step-by-step guidance. You can also use these learning modules to just learn new skills and ramp yourself up on Microsoft products. With that, let's get the session started. Urge you all to keep the session interactive. We've got a bunch of Azure Migrate leads and marketing leads on the chat window, so feel free to use the chat for any questions or comments related to migration.
And you can just pop in there and just say hi. Just tell us what brings you here, essentially.
That's right, folks. So let's get the session started by outlining some of our objectives today. Here are some objectives we'll definitely achieve today, but we want to hear more from you on what you would like to get out of the session. So please feel free to type in the chat box and let our moderators know what brings you to the session. Moving on, when you think about moving to Azure, it's very important to understand the fundamental driver to adopt cloud.
Very well said, Deepika. We've seen time and again that we know customers want to migrate to cloud, but they don't really know the benefits really well.
That's so true, Rashi. Why don't we quickly set some context on some of the top drivers?
Let's go.
Optimize costs. You can flip capex to opex and just pay for what you consume and don't have to spend all that big money on managing data centers. Building security and resilience. Microsoft has over $1 trillion in security investments.
Did you
And
just
that's
say
a
one?
lot of I did, Rashi.
Wow.
Indeed, Microsoft has over $1 trillion and over 3,500 security professionals who are working tirelessly to make the cloud more secure and compliant for your organization. Scalability. Cloud capacity is scalable effortlessly. Focus on innovation. You can remove those operational burdens and just free up your IT resources to focus on innovation, both for your business and your customers. But these benefits are well understood by now, and we're seeing migration and modernization projects starting to accelerate. Many of the reasons for this acceleration are infrastructure driven, but with the recent change in times and with the customer use cases maturing, we're seeing a whole lot of other motivators. Rashi, why don't you walk us through some of the top trends we're seeing of late?
Let's do that. So, first of all, maintaining data centers can be a huge financial burden. As a customers start to supporting remote work models, they're viewing data center contract expiration as some kind of an opportunity, perhaps an inflection point to move from a capex to an opex kind of a model. And while we are at that, a lot of businesses we are talking to are facing cash flow challenges. Customers want to free up cash and they want to invest in other parts of businesses that cash would be utilized much better. And we all know that resource constraints on premise just don't make sense anymore. Let's move on to the third one, which is basically cybersecurity threats. These cybersecurity threats and security is best maintained when you run on a secure cloud like Azure, which has the most advanced set of governance and compliance capabilities of any cloud provider.
True, Rashi. And let's not forget how the times have changed with the pandemic. While there is
Exactly.
a slowdown in some sectors, a lot of other businesses are also accelerating. They're finding that their existing systems and solutions are just not able to keep up. Meeting demand for rapidly scaling infrastructure is best met on a platform like Azure. But Rashi, all the drivers that we've spoken so far are business related drivers. What benefits can I expect from my developer community and my application teams?
So you just talked about it just a few moments back, Deepika. The ability to shift your focus on application innovation is the biggest trigger for developers and our community out there. So with Azure, you can significantly reduce or eliminate the operational responsibilities and kind of refocus your efforts on innovation. So you can let Microsoft do take care of the maintenance, the OS upgrades, the security patching, while you can focus on innovating and to getting your applications faster in the market. This does give you a competitive edge over your competitors as well, and who doesn't want that, right, Deepika?
So true.
Awesome. So we've been talking. I think it's a great point to maybe just take a pause, reflect on what we've talked so far, and what's better than a pop quiz, right?
Absolutely, Rashi. Do we get any gifts for guessing the correct answers?
Oh, I knew you'd ask that. And yes, you'll get the gift of knowledge. So if that's enough, I'd encourage everyone on the chat to start paying attention at this point. You'll start seeing a knowledge question in your chat window in just a few seconds. Your moderators will put your first question in just a few seconds. And you need to choose the option that you feel is correct and mark the answers in the chat. And we will monitor the poll and see what you are answering. So should we get started, Deepika?
Absolutely, Rashi. Let's do this.
Awesome. Let's pull the first question up, and this is when you should start seeing this question in your chat window as a poll. So which of the following best describes the benefits of moving to Azure? We just talked about this a little bit, but I want to bring up one topic. Do you think, Deepika, it's just about cost? If you look at all the three options, talks about cost. What do you think?
Yeah, Rashi, honestly, I would say all of the above, but I see the trickery in the title of the question, which is best
Exactly.
described. So, of course, it's not just about cost. We spoke about the $1 trillion dollar investments. So, we know we can eliminate one option because it doesn't focus on security so much. But there is, of course, one option which clearly stands out, Rashi.
I think you're helping our audience over there, and we know that the chat is already live. We don't know how many people have answered yet, but we kind of know the answer already. So let's maybe move on to the answer. Give everyone a little more time. So yes, the option B is the correct answer. These are all the benefits that you get with Azure. So the cloud delivers fundamental technology benefits that can help your enterprise. So I think we're done with question one. This was a good warm up. Should we move on to the second question, Deepika?
Yes, Rashi, let's do that.
Okay, awesome. So let's move on to the second question. So, folks on the call, you'll see the second question coming up in your chat window anytime now. The question is, which of the following best describes the common migration and modernization triggers? So, again, there's most of the customers we talk to, a lot of them think it's only the infrastructure drivers that makes you migrate to cloud. What do you think, Deepika?
Yeah, I think Rashi, now you gave it away with this statement. Of course, it's not just about infrastructure related drivers. You
Right.
also want to think through your business oriented drivers as well as focus on innovation. And there's one option which has all this culmination of all these different factors. And that's the answer that should put you in the right spot here.
Right, and I think it's a great time. We should just look what the audience is responding. Should we just quickly check on the
Yes,
results while we
I'm
move
actually
on?
checking on that, Rashi, and you won't believe it. We have 90% of the audience who's put in the correct answer, Rashi. I think our audience is on top of the game here, Rashi.
That's awesome. So I hear most of the people have responded to the right option. I don't think we need to explain more about this. Great. I think it just feels right. It feels that we're starting at the right point. So let's bring in the third question. And this is the question you'll start seeing in your chat window again. You all are pros now. You know how to answer this. When you consider if you should migrate or modernize your applications, which is the first question you should ask during the evaluation? And I'll tell you, Deepika, the one thing I hear from customers a lot is, I want to move to containers. Should I use containers? I think a lot of customers do come to us with the target set in the mind.
Of course, Rashi, I think this is so common. Of course, with the latest advent in technologies, folks have understood container adoption and it's being widely adopted in the market. And people are taking these buzzwords and seeing if that's like an approach they should take. But I think folks should understand that they need to take a step back and understand and go about this more fundamentally. Talk to your application teams and understand what's the future of this application. Is this something that's going to be there for a long time and you want to actively invest in this application, or is just something that's going to be sunset in the near future? Do you really want to invest all the dollars and bring it to cloud and spend all that money on migration just to understand that it's going to be decommissioned? So I think the first step is to take a step back and think through fundamentally and have like a more holistic approach to how you want to look at the target for that application.
You're bang on that, Deepika, and I see the results. Majority of our folks have said option A, which is the right answer. So yes, if an application has a future development, it's a key question to ask when you are evaluating your cloud migration, and that's when you decide if this should move to a platform as a service. Should you move the infra, or should you actually modernize once in cloud? So I feel really great about this. What do you think, Deepika? I think we've been getting
Absolutely. Yeah.
responses.
Yes, and I'm loving that everyone's getting it right. It just shows how folks are thinking about this, and it just makes me very happy, Rashi. This actually is the perfect segue for our next topic. So let's shift gears and look at how to look at a typical migration and modernization journey. Do understand that cloud migration involves organizational change management that spans people, process, and technology. Typically, we can break the migration and modernization journey into three phases: the planning phase, the implementation phase, and the operation phase.
Yes, and Deepika, I think it's worthwhile to mention that our audience should keep into mind that this approach is very specific to their organization. So the time that they spent in each of these phases and the scope or the focus would be different per organization.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Rashi. That's so true. Why don't we get started and deep dive into the phases? Starting with the planning phase. It is the critical time that will determine how your migration journey will unfold. It's the right time to have your stakeholders aligned on the vision and roadmap. Gathering stakeholder alignment is super critical. One, it helps you to execute faster, smoother migrations that are in line with your organization goals. And two, it helps you to get the buy in of all the stakeholders involved. Rashi and I cannot emphasize this enough. You should also work with your stakeholders to build business cases so you can reach a common understanding of the business value or ROI you can expect. Start planning by deep diving into your application and infrastructure estate. Take inventory and assess your workload for their cloud readiness. This assessment will help guide your approach in the cloud execution phase. You can also leverage tools like Azure Migrate, which can help perform discovery and assessments very quickly for you.
Right, and you rightly said, Deepika, we can't emphasize enough on how important the planning phase is. But I want to tell this to all our audience. I know this seems a little overwhelming to start with. There's just too many new words that we're introducing one by one each slide. But I want to tell you, you don't have to do this alone. We've seen customers engaging partners who are domain expert, who have domain expertise in this area, and you can use their help in this planning and the next execution phase as well.
Yeah. Talking about execution phase again, ensure that you're factoring in Azure fundamentals and workload level considerations to determine the target migration or modernization approach. Follow an iterative, workload based, wave oriented approach to your migration executions. This will help your teams to execute in a focused manner, thereby improving the overall quality of the migration and also allowing for incremental improvements along the way.
Right. And great you mentioned cloud skills. I wanted to add just one more point there. Looking at investments needed to augment your organizational skills is super critical. Ensure that if you're migrating to cloud, your teams, your IT and app development teams are well versed and are skilled up on Azure, and it just makes the entire execution phase much simpler.
So true, Rashi. I think you brought it to home with that one. Let's go look at the last phase, which is the operations phase. Governance and management are key factors in this phase. Azure has a whole suite of solutions to help you here, be it ensuring compliance with Azure policy, security and governance with Azure Security Center, seamless management with Azure automation, or just ensuring business continuity with backup and monitoring. We've got you covered here. Rashi, now that we've gathered an understanding of the different phases of a cloud migration and modernization journey, let's walk through some of the common migration and modernization projects we've been seeing. But before that, I just want to take a quick pause and check if we have any questions on this topic, Rashi.
Yeah.
Just checking for questions. Oh, I see one question, Rashi. What about tools? What tools can we make use of in this cloud migration journey? Do you want to
Yeah.
take that one, Rashi?
Yeah, I just say, just hang in there. We're just getting there. We're going to discuss explicitly about all the tools and processes you can use. So, just after this section, we'll cover tools as well. Awesome. So before even going to tools, as I said, let's just look at the most common migration projects that customers have been executing. So you look at the first one, which is the most common scenario that we see is migrating your Windows and Linux servers to Azure. The next is database migration. So not just optimizing costs, but also to improve performance, achieving flexibility and scalability. And with COVID, especially Deepika, dealing with realities of working from home, customers have been migrating their on-prem VDI to Azure as well. So these are some of the most common migration projects that we've seen.
Why don't we put things into perspective, Rashi, and give the audience a few examples of how they can think through their migrations?
Yeah.
Let's start with Azure IaaS as a target. We're seeing very high volumes of workloads such as Windows Server, Linux, SQL Server as customers continue to migrate their data centers to Azure. You can use our migration tooling and take any application that's running on premises and migrate the web, app, and data tiers of that application to Azure IaaS. While Azure IaaS may not be modernizing the application itself, but you can make use of other cloud native capabilities as a modernized toolset to manage your IaaS deployments and updates. Now, talking about another target, which is IaaS, which of course the Azure VMware solution offering. If you're a VMware shop, you don't have to worry. You can seamlessly migrate to our dedicated Azure VMware solution offering. This way, you can continue to manage your environment with the same VMware tools you already know of while you modernize your infrastructure with Azure native services.
Yeah, and you talked about infrastructure as a service offerings, Deepika. Let's just look at a couple of other scenarios that we talked about. So let's look at platform as a service offerings. With Azure SQL, you can rehost SQL workloads on SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. You can modernize your existing applications with Azure SQL Managed Instance and also support modern cloud applications with Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL Edge as well. Let's also talk through some of the most common applications, common workloads that we see. These are these custom applications, be it on .NET and Java. And we've seen modernization as the most common approach for coming to cloud in this one. So if you want to maintain control of your infrastructure, you can choose to migrate to Azure virtual machines. If you like the portability benefit that comes with containers and Azure Kubernetes services, you can go there. If you choose to just migrate it to a platform as a service, you can go to Azure App Services as well.
Rashi, you spoke about the increasing need to support remote work models, and of course, we're seeing that in action.
Yeah,
Customer demand for VDI migration continues to be on the high as organizations strive to keep their employees productive for remote work engagements. You
exactly.
can migrate your on prem virtual desktops to Windows virtual desktops on Azure while you migrate the underlying VDI infrastructure to Azure IS.
Perfect. I think we've talked about migration projects, and we had a lot of curiosity around Azure migration tools present. So, and we have Deepika, you and I have seen customers getting super overwhelmed with projects, and Microsoft is aware of that, and that is why we want to talk about. To support our customers, these are the set of tools and services that are already on offer.
Rashi, I think our audience will be super interested to do a deep dive on this one. Why don't we get started there?
Let's do that. So let's get started with the cloud adoption framework for Azure. So if you're new to Azure, and the best way to get started is the cloud adoption framework. It's Microsoft certified guidance. You can get best practices, documentations, and tools that are designed to help you create and implement business and technology strategies for the cloud. So, all you cloud architects, IT professionals, and business decision makers who want to achieve cloud adoption goals across these phases, cloud adoption framework is where you should get started with. So next up on the list is Azure Migrate, and I know Deepika has been patiently waiting to explain you all about this tool. But before that, I want to remind everyone that they can put their questions in the chat. Our moderators will be happy to answer them, and we're also monitoring the chat, and we'll take up some of those questions as well. So take it away, Deepika.
Thank you, Rashi. Regardless of the migration or modernization scenarios you're looking to execute, Azure Migrate is your go to choice. To just put it in one line, Azure Migrate is a central hub of tools for all your data center migration or modernization needs, be it infrastructure, data, or applications. It supports key migration scenarios including migrating Windows Server, Linux, SQL Server, databases, data box, using data box, web applications, VDI. It's got a whole wide range. We also support containerizing and modernizing .NET and Java applications onto Azure App Service and Azure Kubernetes Service. What's more is Azure Migrate also offers a central place to track your migrations all the way from discovery assessment to the migration journey. Rashi, why don't we spend a few minutes and demonstrate some of these powerful capabilities to our audience?
Let's do that. So let's start with the Azure Migrate Discovery and Assessment tool. This is the first party tool that allows you to perform an agentless, comprehensive, at-scale discovery of machines running on any platform, be it VMware, Hyper-V, physical servers, or even other clouds as well. And during your planning phase, discovering your IT estate is one of the most crucial things you can do. So you can also leverage the CSV import option where you can do a bulk import of your source machines and just perform quick migration assessments. This tool also provides capability to inventory applications and software components that you might not be aware are running on these servers, right? Then comes the agentless dependency mapping capability. It helps you visualize dependencies across different tiers of applications or across applications and ensure that nothing is left behind when you migrate.
Yes, and this is a powerful capability that you can leverage to design high confidence migration waves and mitigate any complexities upfront.
Exactly. Next comes with all this rich data that we discovered, we you can perform something called migration assessment, which helps you identify your readiness, gives you right-sized recommendations, and lets you know the cost of running your workloads on Azure. Right now, we provide recommendations for migrating to Azure virtual machines, Azure VMware solution, Azure SQL, and also Azure App Services now. And you can customize all these assessments. You can create your different what if scenarios, and just pick the right sites, right settings that work for you. So we've talked about assessments and discovery. Let's maybe talk through the execution phase, right, Deepika? What does the server migration tool do for the customers?
Yes, absolutely, Rashi. The server migration tool can be leveraged to migrate any source machine running on any platform to Azure. The server migration tool offers two options. You have an agentless capability where you can migrate your VMware and Hyper-V VMs, and you have an agent-based migration options for migrating your bare metal servers or VMs running on other public clouds like AWS and GCP. With the agentless option, you can ensure zero data loss while migrating your VMware VMs. The Azure Migrate Server Migration tool also gives you an option to perform a test migration and validate your application performance and migrate to Azure with confidence.
Awesome. So this option works really well for your rehost scenarios. We recently launched another tool, and I think Deepika, it's the right time to introduce that to our audience.
Yes, one of the recent additions to our portfolio, the app containerization tool, provides an easy way to containerize existing applications with minimal to no code changes. It helps you to discover application components and package them into a container image. You can then deploy the containerized image on Azure Kubernetes Service or Azure App Service. That's not it. While containerizing these applications, the tool also helps you to move the application content on the file server or a network file share to persistent volumes outside of the container image. You can also customize, download, and reuse the tool generated artifacts, be it Docker files or container images, for any day to operations. Well, I think with that, Rashi, I think that sort of sums up the tools that we wanted to cover today. I want to take a quick pause and check if you have any questions and if folks have any top of mind questions for us.
Right. And it might be possible that a couple of folks are not able to get the questions out in the chat right now. We are going to take questions in the end as well. So keep those questions with you. We can take them later as well.
Yes, yes. And feel free to anyway type in the chat if you can. Our moderators are monitoring the chat and will help you with any answers that you're looking for. Oh, Rashi, this section. I was so looking forward to this section. So we promised you a surprise, and here it is. We are going to do a demo of the Azure Migrate tooling. We thought, what a better way than actually show you for real how easy it is to discover, assess, and migrate with Azure Migrate. In this demo, we'll take you through the entire spectrum of Azure Migrate, all the way from discovery, assessment to migration, and talk about how you can leverage the tool at different stages of your migration and modernization journey. Rashi, let's get started. Firstly, to get started, you need an Azure subscription. Of course, it can be a free one or a paid one. Using Azure Migrate is completely free, although you may have to pay some charges for compute and storage when you finally end up migrating, but we'll come to that in a little bit. To get started, of course, you have to access the Azure portal. And on the Azure portal to access Azure Migrate, all you have to do is go search for Azure Migrate in the search bar. So I'll quickly do that. So as soon as you do this, you land on the Azure Migrate Hub page where you can see different scenarios that you can embark your journey on. For this demo, we'll look at the rehost scenario. So I'll go to the server, databases, and web app scenario and click Discover, Assess, and Migrate to get started. As soon as you click this, you'll be prompted to create an Azure Migrate project. If you already have existing projects, by default, it'll load up the last project you were working on. You also have the option to switch between different projects, but for today's demo, let's go ahead and create a new Azure Migrate project. Click on Change and click here to get started. It's super easy to create an Azure Migrate project. As you can see, very few inputs to get started. I'll select the subscription, I'll select the resource group, give the project a name, and we'll choose the geography where the project should be hosted. The Azure Migrate project is nothing but a logical container of all the metadata that we pick from your on premise environment. And as you can see, Rashi, there are many regions for customers to select from.
Right. So, folks with data residency considerations, we've got you covered with such comprehensive geo coverage.
Yes, I'll select a region to go ahead. Now let's explore some of the advanced capabilities that are part of the Azure Migrate project creation. As you can see, you can choose the connectivity method for the project. You can choose public endpoint or private endpoint. Folks with strict organizational requirements to not traverse public networks, the private endpoint connectivity method is for you. With this option, you can discover, assess, and migrate over a private network leveraging Azure Private Link. For today's demo, we'll stick with the default scenario, which is the public endpoint connectivity scenario. So I'll review my settings again and click Create to get started. So what this does is it goes and creates the Azure Migrate project in the subscription and resource group that we've chosen previously. What it also does is it goes and pre-configures some of the tools we spoke about, the discovery and assessment tool and the server migration tool. As you can recall, the discovery and assessment tool can be used to discover, assess workloads to Azure. You can discover and assess Linux, Windows, SQL, or even web applications. You can also analyze dependencies and also perform assessments. The server migration tool again can be used to migrate servers running on any platform to Azure. You also have the option to add other first party tools or independent software vendor tools for any other assessment or migration scenarios you'd like to execute. The best part about all this is you can discover and assess up to 35,000 servers in one project. Again, this tool was built keeping the requirements of ad scale discovery in mind. Okay, now that we've created the Azure Migrate project, let's go ahead and look at how do you perform discovery and assessments.
Awesome. Let's do that. So I'll move on to the next section of this demo, and let's take you through what a typical discovery assessment or essentially a planning journey with Azure Migrate looks like. So at this point, let me get started. You can start, but the project is already configured. The first thing we do is click on discover and start discovering your data center. You can choose to discover using an appliance or import using a CSV. If you choose to import using a CSV, you need to download a CSV template, put in your server inventory data, and just bring it to Azure. And you can still do the same amount of migration planning you could with as you can do with an appliance. So for this demo, we'll choose discovering using an appliance, and I can choose what kind of virtualization is present. For this demo, I'm going to use the VMware vSphere hypervisor option. At this point, you can see there are a couple of steps that I need to do to start discovering. Before that, I just want to quickly touch upon what an appliance is. An appliance is nothing but a virtual machine or a server that you will spin up in your on-premises environment, which will discover your configuration and your performance data and will send it back to Azure. So the first step here is to generate a project key.
And this project, we will go and create some resources for you in the background and link it to your Azure Migrate project. And these resources are required for the functioning of the Azure Migrate project.
Exactly. So I give this appliance a name and just click on generate key. While this key is generating, we're going to move to the next step, which is downloading the Azure Migrate appliance. As you can see, there are two options. You can download via an OVA file or a zip file. For the purpose of this demo, I've already downloaded the appliance and have started configuring it as well. But this is also pretty simple. You can find all this in our documentation and the learn module that you are following along. The third step is to set up the appliance. Yes, there are some compute and storage requirements that you need to fulfill before you start setting up the appliance. And this again is documented in the documentation. The last step is to configure the appliance and initiate discovery. As I said, for the purpose of this demo, we've gone ahead and configured an appliance already. As you can see, I've actually done, I've connected to this appliance, and what you can see is an appliance configuration manager web application. you see there are a couple of steps that you need to do before you start the discovery. The first one is you set up some prerequisites, you register with Azure Migrate, you provide credentials and discovery sources, and that's it. That's when you can click on Start Discovery over here and just start the discovery process. The setup prerequisites, all these prerequisites are automatically running for you from the appliance, but you can rerun that at any point. This is just to make sure the health is perfectly maintained of the appliance and the connection is maintained between Azure and the appliance. The second step is to register with Azure Migrate. Deepika talked about the project key. We'll give this project key over here and log in with one of our users. I've already done that in this step, and this appliance has been successfully registered. I'm good to move on to my third step, which is essentially managing credentials and discovery sources. The first thing I need to do is give the vCenter server credentials of my VMs. Here you can see I've already provided a vCenter credentials over here. The next thing I need to do is give FQDN or my vCenter server IP address. I can, you can see over here, I've already done that in this appliance and the discovery has been initiated. I can revalidate these at any point, add more credentials, do all that in this step at this point. So essentially, if you were just doing server discovery, you just need to do these steps, scroll down and click on Start Discovery button, and your server configuration and performance data will start coming into Azure Migrate. But if you wish to do more than that and get workload level details as well, you need to provide more credentials. In this case, we have already provided some SQL Server instances credentials and some ASP.NET Web Apps, a couple of other Windows credentials to get started with. Again, as we said, we can revalidate these credentials at any point and just start discovery. So this is what all you need to do in configuring this appliance. Not super overwhelming. As soon as I start discovery, my servers and my data will start showing up in Azure Migrate just within a few minutes. So
Oh,
as you
wow,
can see here,
Rashi. Yeah, truly, the discovery has started indeed.
exactly, Deepika. So the discovery has started coming in. For this project, I went ahead and did a little more, but I'll talk about this in just a bit. So for this server, you can see we've discovered a couple of servers. Some of them are running SQL servers, a couple of them are running IIS. You can see that the OS distribution of these servers. What I did just to fast forward this for this demo, I'd already done some sort of analysis to demonstrate to our audience what they can do with Azure Migrate. So you see some dependency analysis progress and a couple of assessments created, but we'll come back to that. So let's move on and look at what is this discovery all about. So I click on these number of servers. What I see here is a list of all the servers that we discovered from that vCenter, the configuration data, what applications are running on these servers, and then essentially what are the other workloads running on these servers. At this point, let's go and look at the applications running on one of these servers. So I can see a couple of applications running over here. I can see roles and features are running on these server as well. And what we recommend customers do is export the software inventory, run analysis on top of it, just to see, say, what are the most common applications running on my server. So you can do all that by exporting this into an XLSX workbook. The next thing we'll do is let's look at view dependencies and see what kind of data this fetches in. We talked about this in the capabilities of this tool. What it does is currently set up to 1 day by default, but I can change the time duration of between what period I want to see these dependency data. What you see over here is you can see this particular server has been talking to a couple of other servers. It gives you the port information, the processes that are running, and all that rich information that is needed for you to understand that to migrate this server, you have to make sure you migrate the other 10 or 12 that are dependent on this. So this is where what we mean when we say no server left behind. You can also export these application dependencies, and there is a GitHub utility that we have where you can visualize the dependency data and make more use of it. So Deepika, at this point, I think it's a great point to go ahead and show our audience what happens if I click on a particular workload. So in this case, I can see a couple of SQL instances running on my servers. I can see what edition and what SQL version are they running. I can also go and look at the databases that are running on these servers and just do a sanity check of what I thought was running inside. I can see what size these databases are, what are the compatibility levels, and we're going to use all that information during assessment. So just hold on to that. Let's also look at web apps in the similar way. I can see there are two web apps running on these servers. I can click on them, go inside, see what ports are they running, what URLs there are, all that good amount of information. So
So, Rashi, just one thing to add here is that the discovery process has not just collected configuration data for these servers, but it has also gone ahead and collected the actual resource utilization for the servers. Rashi, are you going to tell the audience how we can leverage this information that we have just collected?
yes, we're just about to get there, Deepika. So all this amazing discovery information that we just saw took all the hassle of configuring the appliance. This is where it all comes to use. So the next step we ask customers to do is prioritize their assessments, create a migration assessment, and find out the right target recommendation. So at this step, I'll click on assess over here, choose the type of assessment I'm trying to create, which target in Azure am I planning to migrate to. For this one, I'll click on Azure VM. You can see this is a very simple three-step wizard. I've already selected Azure VM as an assessment type, and Deepika, because we're doing this using appliance, I've already chosen servers discovered from Azure Appliance as a discovery source. At this point, I can choose properties that govern this assessment. There are a couple of default properties which give you the most cost effective recommendation, but I can also click on edit and change a couple of them. I think let's just look at what are these. So if you look at it, there are target properties, sizing properties, and pricing or costing properties. If you look at the regions, we have a lot of target Azure regions available. You can use different reserved instances and hybrid benefit properties that only Azure gives you. So you can do all that customization with migration assessments. I'll click on next, give this assessment a name, and start selecting servers that I want to assess. And at this point, I'm going to create something called a group. A group is nothing but a set of servers that I want to migrate together. At this point, I've just selected all of my VMware servers, but I can add other servers from other hypervisors also in this group before I assess.
Yes, and just to quickly add here, we can add up to 35,000 servers in a group and assess all of them together. That's scale right there for you.
Exactly. That's your entire data centers for most enterprises. So at this point, we have all the data. We'll click on create assessment, and that's it. That's all you need to create an assessment report to start your migration planning. Let's just quickly have a look at a couple of assessments and see what meaningful data or insights can our customers derive. So you can look at the Azure readiness. It tells you how many servers are ready for Azure VM, which ones are ready with conditions, what is the monthly cost estimate, what is the division of a storage split looks like when I take them to Azure VMs and manage disks. Let's look into an Azure readiness report. You can see, you'll see all that report on a per server basis. You can see a right-sized Azure VM recommendation. Deepika, you're going to cover the suggested tool just in a little bit. I know you're waiting for it. But essentially, I can go into a particular server and look at all that information, all that rich information that Discovery got me. You can see the CPU memory utilization that you got to size this. And the one takeaway that we want our audience to take home back with is you don't have to over provision on cloud. This is you can pay for what you use. So similarly, you can see cost details per server. At this point, you can decide to export this assessment as well. We have a Power BI utility where you can export multiple reports and visualize how your cost and business case eventually is going to look like. You can also edit properties. We did this while we were creating assessments, but Deepika, you can do a lot of your what if analysis using these
Yes.
edit properties.
So you can go tweak those settings and see how that will impact your assessment results. And just like Rashi said, create your different what if scenarios.
Exactly. So this was about Azure VM as the target. Let's quickly look at the other infrastructure as a service target, which is Azure VMware solution. So if you're a primarily a VMware shop, it does make sense to migrate to a target like Azure VMware solution. Maybe you don't want to just overnight change to Azure. You want to use all that skills and resources you've built over the years with your VMware setup. So this Azure VMware Solution Assessment helps you do that. You can see we've discovered we had 67 servers in this assessment. Couple of them were ready, couple were ready with conditions. We can just fix the ready with conditions with just some number of small configuration fixes. You can see there are 4 AVS nodes that are recommended for running these VMs. I can already see how much resource out of these 4 AVS nodes is being utilized by these 67 virtual machines. So if I decide to scale, I can always see how much capacity is available. I can see this on a per server level as well. You can see the suggested migration tool. And here again, you can export this assessment, create your different what if scenarios, and essentially bring in the value of your VMware setup on-prem to Azure. So maybe let's look at a couple of properties here that you can bring in on-prem, from on-prem to Azure. You can choose from a good set of target locations in Azure, different FTT rate level settings, different pricing settings, and just see how that sizing and cost going to change. And for AVS, yes, we agree the sizing can be a little complex. So we've also added a guide over here for you to look at what actually went into sizing these. So we've talked about Azure VM assessments, Azure VMware solution assessment, and Deepika, I think it's a perfect segue to the next set of assessments, which are our PASS assessments.
Are you going to start with SQL, Rashi? Because I know our
We will.
audience is going to love that.
Yes, we will. So let's get started with Azure SQL Assessment next. Basically, if you want to migrate your Microsoft SQL Server instances to Azure, Azure SQL Assessment just helps you plan that a little better and helps you navigate through those initial difficulties that you face during planning. I look at a particular assessment. There are a certain number of servers, SQL instances, user databases that we are assessing. You can see their readiness by recommended deployment type. When I say recommended deployment type, the assessment is looking at feature compatibility and resource utilization before suggesting the right pass target for you. You can also see the corresponding cost for running these workloads. And I think it'll be valuable if we look at a couple of scenarios that our customers might want to execute on this tool. So if you look at it, you can see the Azure SQL DB and MI readiness, the recommended deployment type and configuration at this point. Let's look at one of those scenarios where our SQL instance is not ready for any of the past targets. And that happens quite a lot of times because of feature compatibility, as I said. For this, we've recommended migrating the SQL instance into an Azure VM instead. You can look at the blockers which are making it difficult for you to migrate to Azure SQL DB or MI. You can choose to remediate them or just go with an IIS specific method. So if you do it at scale, you can see how easier it can become to plan even your database migrations with Azure Migrate. Let's quickly look at a couple of more scenarios real quick if you're ready for both. If you're ready for one of the SQL pass targets, how do we recommend a recommended deployment type? Let's look at one where Azure SQL DB is recommended. Here I can see recommendations and cost per DB of what it should look like in Azure. And next, I think it'll be valuable to just see what happens if it's ready for both pass targets. And we get these questions a lot. What happens if I'm ready for both DB and MI? What should I do now? So for such instances, if I click on a particular instance where I want to figure out why I was given a certain recommendation, I can click on that instance and see the recommendation details. And here it clearly mentions it's because of cost, because Azure SQL MI target just came out to be cheaper than Azure SQL DB. And these again are performance-based assessments, totally dependent on resource utilization. And these again, you can see the cost per instance level. You can export these assessments, create your what if analysis using edit properties, and just see how Azure actually helps you utilize all those SQL Server licenses running on prem. What are the other reserved instance settings that can help you make this migration more successful? So again, you can export this assessment, and let's move on to the last one. I know we moved really quickly, but let's look at our the newest assessment type, which is the Azure App Services. You can plan migrating your .NET web applications to Azure App Services using this assessment type. You can see we have the same readiness over here. It tells you if your applications are ready, not ready. If they are ready, what does the cost look like for running them in Azure App Services? So, Deepika, we all know doing this without a tool, even at scale, can become super, super difficult. Let's look at a couple of scenarios here as well. You can see this application, it's not ready for Azure App Services, and you can click on that not ready status and figure out what went wrong, what you need to fix to make it ready for this past target, or you can always decide to just migrate this entire VM to Azure. Again, if you are ready for migrating it to Azure App Services, you need to pack all those applications into a plan, and this particular assessment helps you group these applications together. If you can see, this is one plan that we're recommending you to move with, and it already has an inventory of web apps it will move with. Similarly, you can see cost. And again, as other assessments, you can export these, edit these, create your what if scenarios. And this is super important in your planning journey, especially when you're creating business cases where all these inputs need to go in, and figure out if migrating to Azure is bringing the value to your business. Does it make financial sense at this point? And how will you migrate? What's the speed of migration? All of that is something that you can figure out by running these set of assessments. So
Yes.
yes, we had a breathless assessment demo, but
Yeah,
yeah,
that was amazing, Rashi. I think I truly love the assessment demo. But like you said, let's shift gears. Let's look at how the server migration tool can be leveraged. Rashi, if you can, are you set?
yes, yes. Let's
Okay,
move on
let's
to.
get started with the server migration demo. The server migration tool can essentially be used to migrate thousands of servers to Azure. The tool offers automation options, private link support, and supports up to 500 parallel migration. You can also make use of the resource tags and custom naming options for better management of your workloads once they are migrated to Azure. So before you start with a migration, you need to, of course, do a data copy to Azure, or what we call a replication process. Through these, you'll essentially replicate your servers to Azure. So that's like the first thing to get started. Let's click on replicate. Here, you can, of course, choose the type of your server. You can choose the server virtualization type. You can see VMware VMs, Hyper-V VMs, or even physical servers. For today's demo, let's select the VMware vSphere. I'll select the appliance name and click Next to move forward. In this tab, I can choose servers that are part of my migration wave that I want to migrate. Here comes the beauty of an integrated tool. I can actually import the server list and the migration settings from assessments that was just created before. Isn't this really cool?
That's really awesome. And otherwise, you would have to do this all manually, right?
Right, said Rashi. Now here again, of course, I'll create the assessments and I'll move forward where I can choose the target settings. I'll choose the region name, the subscription, resource group. I'll choose the virtual network and subnet the VM should belong to. I can also select additional options like the infrastructure redundancy options or the disk encryption type. Moving forward here, I have an option to actually go ahead and customize my Azure VM name, the name of the finally migrated VM and what that should look like. So if you've got naming standards that are set by your organizations, you can leverage this option for sure. If you observe here, you can also customize the Azure VM size. The automatic recommendation from assessment has been brought into this screen as well. So if you see, the Azure VM size is per the recommendation of what your assessment has computed. But of course, you can scale up and scale down per your requirements.
One thing that our audience should definitely pay attention to is you don't have to over provision on cloud. You see, this was a 4-core 8 GB RAM machine, which was essentially recommended to be migrated as a 1-core 3.5 GB RAM machine. So, yes, you do not have to over provision on cloud and you can scale whenever you want.
Yes, truly, Rashi. Well said. Now let's move ahead and go to the disks tab. Again, you get the similar sort of customizations there as well. Here you can choose if you want to take all your data to Azure, if you just want to take a couple of disks to Azure. Again, here you can provide the tags that your finally migrated VMs, the disks, and the network cards will actually inherit.
So, you
Again,
can
tagging is super critical. Yep, Rashi?
exactly. I was just coming to that, Deepika. You can add tags to these migrated servers and resources to just be in compliance with your org requirements, right?
Yep, absolutely, Rashi. So let's quickly review the replication settings and click replicate to start the process. The replication process will take a few minutes based on the amount of data that has to be transferred, but don't worry, we've got all the progress and status bar to make sure that it's progressing well. So you can see here the replication health is all good. You can see the status, it's initial sync, which means the initial data is being copied. You can also see the call to actions on what should be the next set of actions for you to take. You also have the option to go ahead and stop the replication process in case you don't want data replicating during a blackout window. So for the purpose of this demo, I've speed up the process. So you can see the status has changed to Delta Sync, which means the data copy is done. And now we're just copying over some incremental bits over to Azure. So the next step and one of the best capabilities of this tool is the functionality of test migration. Again, this option allows you to validate your application performance and ensure everything's working as expected before you do like a final migration to Azure. Again, you can either click on test migration or you can go ahead and do a migration, but we recommend you start with a test migration because you can run all your application tests, smoke tests, accepted tests, and just migrate with confidence. To start the test migration, let's select the virtual network that the VM should be part of. Again, Rashi is super important, the virtual network selection here. Ideally, you want to choose an isolated virtual network to perform your tests. You don't want the virtual network to connect your Azure Active Directory or back to your on-prem environment and cause unintended impact. So very crucial decision. You want to do all your tests in an isolated environment and make sure that it's not causing any sort of unintended impact. I'll trigger the test migration job. It's just running some prerequisites and will start the job quite shortly. Again, the job has been started. So we can go and see how that's progressing. Again, we have status and progress bars to let you know how that's proceeding. So we'll go and quickly check how the test migration is proceeding. Yeah, as you can see, the test migration is still in progress. So it's going to take a few minutes, but once that's done, you can go ahead, validate your application performance. And when you're ready, you can go to step 3 and start the migration process. Again, we went through this for one server, but imagine you can do this at scale for 500 parallel migrations of your VMware VMs. And that's it,
That's
Rashi.
Yeah, that's it. That's how simple it is to migrate. I think it's a perfect time to do just a quick recap on what we saw. We saw how to get started with Azure Migrate, how to understand your digital estate and perform discovery. We saw how that rich data insights were captured in the configuration and performance data, and how that helps you create migration assessments and determine the right targets and their cost in Azure. We saw how to finally migrate. So that was quite a lot of stuff that we saw till now. We talked about the rehost tool that helps you lift and shift your servers on-prem to Azure, let's talk about a couple of other tools which are centered more around workload-specific migration tooling. So Azure Database Migration Service is one of that tool that helps you migrate your databases to Azure at scale with near zero downtime. And it's highly resilient. This doesn't only support SQL Server, but it also does support sorry, MySQL, Postgres, and even all other databases, just name it. Moving on to another tool, which is the Azure App Service Migration Assistant. We've been talking about infrastructure, database migration. This helps you bring your applications to Azure. And you can see different flavors of these tools. You can use it to migrate your .NET, Java, and Linux web apps to Azure. Moving on, we have a couple of other tools that Deepika
Yeah.
maybe you want to get started with.
Let's talk about the smart tool, Rashi. Firstly, of course, let's take a second to acknowledge it's a very cool name for a tool.
It
So
is, yeah.
this, yes, of course. So the smart tool is different from the other tools we just spoke about. It's not a workload specific assessment tool, but the smart tool lets you take your first step in understanding your readiness for Azure or cloud, not just technical readiness, but your overall readiness. And what it helps you with, it gives you heat map reports that you can leverage to understand what are some of your areas of strength, or what are some of the areas where you need to invest more in or get more support as you think through your migrations. Moving on to the last but not the least one, of course, the cloud economics guidance. Moving to the cloud is an important business decision as it is a technical one. To support our customers here, Microsoft has released the Cloud Economics Offering and Guidance. This guidance was collated from multiple engagements we've been a part of. It's a collection of technical and financial tips collated by Azure experts that you can use to understand how moving to the cloud can shape your financial posture and your KPIs. With that, we come to an end of the different tools that we had on offer from Azure. I know, Rashi, this is a good point to sort of pause and check if you have any questions. Feel free to type in your questions. Our moderators are monitoring the chat and they'll be very happy to help you out there. Rashi, I
Yeah.
know you have a knowledge check upcoming, but I just want to reserve some time to talk about our awesome programs and, of course, do some quick Q&A with our audience. So let's skip past the knowledge checks, but audience, you have that available in your Learn Life modules. So please go ahead and try that out to see how you've ramped up on the session today. Why don't you help us get started on the programs, Rashi?
Yeah, let's do that. So, starting off with AMP, the AMP program helps customers by getting the right mix of resources and expert help at every step of your migration journey. The focus here is to help not only accelerate Azure migrations and adoption, but also develop skills while you are learning how to perform this migration. Next up, we'll talk about Fast Track for Azure. And this is a customer success program that helps with direct assistance and architectural advice from none other than Azure engineers themselves. So you can get guidance around strategy and planning stages for large projects. Yes, there are some qualifying criteria to get onboarded, but you can have Fast Track help you with your migration projects. Next up, let's talk about MSPs, Deepika.
Yes. So all the programs that we spoke about help you in the planning and execution phases, the ones that we have covered so far. But what about after you have migrated to Azure? As production systems are migrated to Azure, operations will become critical. So Microsoft has built together the Azure Expert Managed Services Provider program to ensure customers have a partner to help them with their operational needs. You'll work with a trusted advisor to offer repeatable, highly automated solutions that can enable and manage hypercloud investments for you. That pretty much sums up all the tools and programs Azure has on offer. We cannot wait for you to get started and leverage these awesome tools for your cloud migration journey. Rashi, I know we covered a lot of topics and all important ones. Can you please summarize and bring it together for our audience?
Let's do that. So, in this module, folks, we learned about the drivers, the phases, and tools that enable successful Azure migrations and modernization projects. So, you can now use these skills and help your organization improve cost efficiency, agility, and scalability by migrating to the cloud. And both Deepika and I are super confident that whatever we've discussed today has set you up for success, and you will help, and this all will help you accelerate your migration and modernization journey to Azure. With this, we want to bring back the learn modules that we've covered today. These are the two learn modules we discussed. We highly recommend that you complete these after the session. Yes, we missed out on the second set of knowledge checks. We highly recommend you do that by yourself, and you'll be able to do everything that we discussed here today and get hands-on experience to reinforce your learning when you go through both of these learn modules.
We hope you found this session helpful and informative. Here are some resources that you can access to learn more and execute successful migrations. Our teams at Azure are constantly making investments to accelerate your migration journey, be it with resources and frameworks such as the Cloud Adoption Framework, programmatic offerings such as the Azure Migration and Modernization Program, and Fast Track for Azure, or even free tools like Azure Migrate. And when you think about Learn Life, I think this is just one mantra that we have: never stop learning. We have more Learn Life sessions for you post Ignite, and it's available all throughout the year. Just a quick reminder, these sessions are free to use and they have step by step guidance, so you can use it as a reference and follow along for any topics in depth. You can also use this Learn Live to also catch up on today's session, and if you want to review any topics in depth, that's available for you as well. Rashi, why don't we switch? Oh, that said, you've got the Q&A slide. I was hoping we could do this as well. Why don't we look through and pick a couple of questions that we can answer for our audience today?
Let's do that. And I just wanted to share, I just saw the poll results. I think the poll was posted and we saw some good amount of responses. Most of them were correct. So good job on that. I think we did a good job, Deepika. Pat on
Yeah,
our
I
back.
think we're very fortunate to have a fabulous audience as well, Rashi.
Yeah.
Rashi, I have one question. I'm hoping you can pick this one up. How long should I run the assessments to get a high confidence recommendation?
Great question, Deepika. So we get these questions a lot from customers. By default, any assessment that you create picks up last 1 day worth of data, or whenever you start the discovery, 1 day worth. But what we recommend customers do is run at least a 7 day or a 1 week and or a 1 month long assessment. When I say that, you need to keep the discovery ongoing for at least a week or a month to get the right pattern of utilization data in it. So I'd say 1 month if you could, but if you really want to speed up the process, 1 week could also be a good enough number.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's good guidance, Rashi. I'll just, oh, there are a lot of questions. Let me pick up this one. Yes. What are the different automation capabilities of Azure Migrate? Rashi, if you don't mind, I can go ahead with this one.
Go ahead.
Azure Migrate provides a PowerShell-based management interface for the server migration tool. So you can just use those PowerShell commandlets to configure and perform migrations in an automated fashion at any velocity that you require. These scripts are already available on GitHub, so you can download them and use them as is, or you can also plug them in and build on top of it for your migration factory approach. I also want to include that we also have automation utilities for our dependency mapping capability and also our assessment capability. Again, all of this is available on our GitHub repository. Hope that
Right.
answers the question.
Yeah, it's a great automation factory that all of you should check out.
Rashil, yes, why don't we pick this one? How can I use the assessment tools to build business cases and present to my stakeholders? Rashi, I think popular question.
Yeah.
Again,
Perfect question at this point. So yes, you can use these assessments. We talked about the different pricing options that you can change and create multiple assessments. We recommend you create assessments on the same group of servers, create them with different RI settings, different Azure hybrid benefit settings, and see how that data cost, the cost varies. Right now, you only get compute and storage cost components, but soon we're going to come up with a feature that will exclusively give you an entire business case with an automated tool like Azure Migrate. So check out the space for more, is all I'll say.
Yes, you don't want to miss out on this announcement, especially folks. So do check out for more on this. Rashi, I think we have a couple of more minutes, so let's pick one more question.
Let's do that.
Um, Again, a lot of questions, folks, and we're just so happy to see this engagement from you. I'll pick this one. Is there a way on how we can estimate the required network bandwidth for migrated workloads to work properly after migration? Can Azure Migrate help with this estimation? Of course, when you think about the server migration options, you again have two migration options there. If you're using an agent based method of replication, there is a deployment planner utility that can help you profile the environment, understand the data churn, and predict the necessary bandwidth requirement for your workloads. Again, to learn more, it's available on a documentation link. So please go ahead and understand how this utility works. But talking more about the agentless VMware migration option, you can work out the bandwidth requirement based on the data that has to be transferred, the volume of data that has to be transferred, and the time within which you want this replication and the migration process to complete. So if you just want like a thumb rule to think about it, think about the data that has to be transferred, apply like a 30% compression ratio on the data that has to be migrated, and you can divide that by the bandwidth that's available for your replication. So you can tweak these parameters to see what sort of timeline it's going to take. Again, I do want to add this, Rashi. I know you gave a quick teaser for our audience, and I want to do the same as well. We have a cool functionality in the works, the replication planner utility, that will help you estimate the initial replication time and migration downtime so you can plan your migrations better. Again, watch out for the space for more. This is another interesting utility you don't want to miss out.
Definitely. And I think this is the perfect time to wrap up this session. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you had a great time, and we could add something to your learning. Happy migrating.
Yes, we cannot wait for you to leverage all these awesome resources and get started with your journey. With that, thank you so much for joining us. You've been such a fabulous audience. We'll see you at the next event and happy migrating. Thank you.
Thank you.